When my sister got married and went to live in another city, I was left alone in our apartment. My friends said that I was lucky, but I felt annoyed. At least Christina cooked and kept the house tidy, but I turned out to be a completely unsuitable housekeeper. I tried to cook a simple soup recently, but it turned out to be some kind of liquid, salty stuff that stray cats wouldn't even eat. And I was so unaccustomed to cleaning that I simply forgot to do it. Within a month, the rooms were overgrown with dust, and the kitchen with greasy stains. And my sneakers stuck to the floor because I didn't even know where the mop was. My piggish nature was a shocking discovery and a disappointment in myself. But Christina said that I would drown in my own filth if I was left alone. What else did she say, huh? I sympathize with your future wife. I shouldn't have brushed her off. Now the whole house was falling apart. There's a mess in the closet, and the flower in the room has wilted. And since my sister left, the apartment has become quiet. It's too quiet. Christina was always playing music at full volume or chatting on the phone. All I could hear was her endless babble, and it just seemed to me that I loved peace. Now, alone, the silence weighed on me. It's annoying. I shouldn't have been so happy when my sister packed her things. The thought crept into her head, and suddenly she and her husband would fail and she would return. But that's unlikely. He looked like a nice guy, especially compared to a slob like me. It would probably be easier for her to live with him, and she wouldn't want to come back. It was difficult for me to fall asleep at night without music or conversation in the next room. I was lying in bed with my face turned to the wall so that the light of the night lanterns wouldn't hit my eyes. I was trying to sleep, and suddenly there was an agonized groan from the ceiling. A long, eerie sound coming from the apartment upstairs. The groan ended in a heavy cough. I listened carefully. The sound was repeated, followed by thuds, as if someone were tapping their feet on the floor, and all over again. Finally, the sound subsided, but there was no peace in my soul. These sounds of suffering were so familiar to me. I remembered that I had heard similar moans since I was a child. They always came from above, but when I was little, I just didn't pay attention to them. And then I stopped noticing at all that it was the sound of a train passing somewhere outside the window. But now that it was so quiet in the apartment, I heard those screams, stomping and coughing again. Who hasn't stopped for more than 20 years? The morning also began with soft screams from above. One day I took these sounds into account, and I couldn't get rid of them. A barely audible groan, but it's audible every time. There is so much pain, suffering and agony in him. Who could scream like that? What kind of pain is hidden in these moans? I imagine different pictures of a man locked in a dark room, suffering from illness, insanity, and unbearable longing. I decided to ask who lived in that apartment, and one day, lingering in the entrance, I heard the door slam upstairs. Of course, I've seen him many times since childhood, and even knew that his name was Viktor Bondarev. It was said about him that he once worked as a doctor, but now he is probably already retired. I don't remember him having a wife or children. He's the kind of old man who's always lonely. But at least sometimes they come out to chat with each other in the yard, and this one was a recluse. I watched my neighbor slouch down the stairs and thought, was he really yelling and stomping in his apartment? "Hello," I said. "Hello," Victor replied quietly, looking away. He passed by without noticing my surprise. I promised myself that I would definitely do the cleaning in the evening, but I sat down to play on the computer and couldn't tear myself away from the new shooter. And that moan again. Bondarev howls. I thought about it, pausing the game. The scream from above intensified, and with it came another, quiet voice. "Quiet, quiet, calm down, don't shout like that. It's going to be easier now." That was Bondarev's voice. So it wasn't him who was yelling, but someone else. Someone else lived in the apartment with him. Strangely, people said that he had no relatives. The next time I met a neighbor in a small store across from our house, we said hello, and he asked the saleswoman, "Do you have frozen chicken for dogs?" "Yes," she replied. "Do you want paws or heads?" "Give me a kilogram of heads," he replied. "Although it's better to have two at once." "Do you have a dog?" I couldn't resist asking. Bondarev's gaze darted around. He seemed to be trying to think of something quickly. "Yes, I just like to drink chicken broth," the neighbor replied without looking at me. "The heads will do for that." "Why are you interested, young man? There's a dog? There's no dog? What's it to you?" No, nothing, just asked," I said. I thought about it myself. And who is he feeding dog food to? It's not like a lying down sick relative drinks himself, but maybe not. The other neighbors would have known about it. Maybe I got it into my head because I wanted to be a hero, to save someone, to do something important. I couldn't help but imagine myself giving a commentary for a report about a detained maniac who had been keeping someone at his home for more than 20 years. Vanity is my sin, but civic responsibility is an advantage. I decided to eavesdrop on what was going on outside my neighbor's door. I was waiting for the right moment. And so, one evening, when the screams and footsteps started from above, I left my apartment and, trying not to make any noise, went up to the floor above. My heart was fluttering with excitement when, holding my breath, I put my ear to someone else's door. At first, only the hum of the washing machine was heard. Where is that groan? Muffled, hoarse, full of pain. I pressed myself closer to the keyhole and plugged my other ear, trying to catch every sound. Suddenly, the door swung open. I jumped out of the way. Bondarev stood on the threshold. He looked angry. His thin lips were pressed tightly together, and he was looking into my forehead as if trying to read my thoughts. "What are you doing at my door?" he asked sternly and firmly. "Why are you standing there eavesdropping?" I didn't lie. Why spin around like a snake in a frying pan in front of a man who is hiding something himself? I looked into his eyes and said, "You're suspicious. There are often screams coming from your apartment. I thought you might be holding someone against their will. Tell me, do you have a prisoner there?" It was a direct question that would surely have made an innocent man lose his head, but the neighbor just grinned. His thin lips pulled into an unpleasant grimace. "Well, come in and see who I'm holding there." Leaving the door open, Bondarev turned his back on me and shuffled down the corridor. I felt like an idiot, and my gut told me that I would have to apologize for my prank soon. Or it's a trap. The maniac realized that he was discovered, so he wants me to come in. What kind of doctor did he work there? A surgeon, maybe? He's going to grab a scalpel and turn around abruptly. He will make one precise blow to the neck and say hello. And from whom do I have such a vivid fantasy? It only makes it difficult to live. I crossed the threshold. There was a heavy, unpleasant smell in Bondarev's apartment, causing acute nausea. The spirit of sickness, unwashed bodies, and human excrement. It turns out that things aren't so bad at home yet. I followed my neighbor and looked around. Torn rags were piled everywhere. In the bathroom, the washing machine was swirling dirty, foamy water in a circle. There was a hot stove in the kitchen, and a black pot was boiling on it, in which the chicken head soup was probably being cooked. Bondarev led me to a closed room, where, most likely, the one for whom this soup was intended was hiding. I stopped 2 meters away from my neighbor, not daring to come closer. I wanted to be ready to rush back at any moment. Fear made my stomach ache. "Just be quiet." He just fell asleep. The old man whispered and opened the door to the room a crack, as if inviting him to look in. "If he wakes up, leave immediately." I involuntarily held my breath, trying not to inhale this suffocating air. There was an old armchair in the room, and someone was sitting in it. One glance was enough to understand that this was not a human being. He's a monster. He was not wearing clothes, but only some scraps of bandages, and even those in places. His entire body was covered with scars, potholes, ulcers, and tumors. This creature seemed to consist of a cluster of painful growths and resembled a human only in shape. There were no eyes or even eye sockets on his head. The ears and nose were also missing. There was only the mouth. No, the mouth. A round black mouth that stretched and contracted with every breath, like an air pump that kept this horrible body alive. One leg was bigger than the other. There are only 3 fingers on the right hand, and 4 on the left. Although it can't be called fingers, it's more like fat growths. It was disgusting to see, but I couldn't tear myself away. Probably, this poisonous stench even scared away insects. I was terrified. Absolutely terrified. "How do you like my prisoner? Would you like that for yourself?" Bondarev asked in a whisper in his tone. There was a strange pleasure. "Who is it?" I crackled to ask. "You won't believe it. It's my grandfather," the neighbor replied. "He is suffering from a terrible illness. He has a special form of cancer that prevents him from dying." "What did you say?" I didn't have time to comprehend more and more amazing details. "What did you hear? He's immortal. He'll outlive you and me." The neighbor spoke dully, as if through cotton wool, and I had to strain my ears to hear at least something in the noise of inhuman breathing. "You knew that all processes except aging take place in cancer cells. Only they usually kill their host. But with this gentleman, it's the opposite. His illness prevents him from dying. Besides, she turned him into a crazy monster that I have to take care of. He is not a human being, but just a living, malignant tumor. I'm telling you this as a doctor." I wasn't looking at my neighbor, but only at the monster, so I immediately noticed that it had moved. His eyeless head jerked, and his raucous breathing became ragged. Bondarev screamed, and his eyes flashed with panic. I took a step back, and my feet got tangled in some kind of cloth. And the monster had already jumped up, knocking over the chair. He waved his arms, spraying pus on the walls, and rushed to the door. Right at me. The Bondarev blocked the exit, grabbed the monster by the shoulders, and held it in place. "Get out of here!" he shouted. "Hurry up, save yourself!" And the man-tumor was still struggling and screaming. His mouth was like a bottomless, rotten abyss. I didn't hesitate any longer, and I stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door behind me, leaving my neighbor to deal with this monster himself. Is it Neen? I don't know. I was acting on my instincts. This disgusting creature was dangerous. Otherwise, why would the neighbor scream, "Save yourself"? I was still shaking from what I saw for a long time. I've been worried since Bondarev. Did he cope with his grandfather? Had been hearing scary noises from above all night. Screams, moans, hoarse, deep sighs. It made me anxious and deprived of sleep. The morning began painfully slowly. I felt completely restless. My muscles were buzzing with accumulated fatigue. I barely got out of bed, went to the kitchen, made myself a cup of coffee. But its bitter taste did not bring any satisfaction. There was only one thought in my head. How was Bondarev? Did I ruin him with my sudden visit yesterday? I breathed a sigh of relief when I met my neighbor at the entrance. He looked the same as always, thin, stooped, with no blood on his face. But there was a wide scratch running from his ear to his collarbone on his neck. Did he do this? I asked, swallowing involuntarily. Oh, nonsense. Bondarev smiled and waved his hand. It could have been worse. There's nothing left of my grandfather in it for a long time. He's a solid cancer that's driven only by hunger and aggression. Yes, he can kill me, but I'm hiding him, keeping people away from him. So tell me, which one of us is a prisoner? His words sounded like a sentence. The neighbor was right. I couldn't imagine myself in his place and how he was living with this burden of responsibility. Can't we put him out of his misery? I asked that, thinking that if he was just a crazy piece of flesh, then destroying him couldn't be considered murder. You can't, the neighbor replied sharply. He's immortal. If you hurt him, he'll heal right away. If you don't feed, it will immediately become aggressive. I know how to approach it. I give him a sedative. He's quiet. He just sleeps and eats. So take him to some scientific institute, I suggested. Scientists will be interested in studying it. The neighbor chuckled and said, Am I not interested? I am also, by the way, a doctor and a scientist, and I've seen all these institute people in their coffins. I was fired from there in '99, and I have to give them such a valuable sample. I observe it myself and keep records. They'll recognize me, the bastards, when I get my doctorate and receive an award. You may not believe it, but I will come up with a cure for death. But he needed his monster. This man had a lot of accumulated resentments and was full of ambition, despite his decent age. "Just don't tell anyone," the neighbor asked. "This is my personal matter." Got it? I didn't know that I'd spent my whole life living next door to a monster, and now all I could think about was that there was something terrible up there. And he's being looked after by a man who hasn't been young for a long time. What happens when he dies? The sounds from above bothered me. I tried to ignore them, turned on the music, but the rumbles, moans, and growls made their way through it. When the neighbor is gone, this filth will come out, kill someone, and I will be the only one who knew everything, but kept silent, not wanting to interfere. I was wondering if I should tell anyone about this. People have the right to know who they live in the same house with, but I haven't done anything for a long time. I was just thinking about what was good and what was bad. Suddenly, this is really a personal, family matter of Bondarev, and no one has the right to interfere. And one day, early in the morning, I was woken up by terrible screams. At first I didn't understand what was going on up there, but then I heard Bondarev's voice. He was screaming, "Come on! Stop it! Sit back down!" And then the blows sounded. Something was crashing and breaking. Someone was hitting the floor. It was the sounds of fighting, chaos, and wheezing. Scary images were spinning in my head. The neighbor is exhausted and exhausted. He tries to hold on to the monster, and it, writhing in agony, squeezes his neck. "Let me go! Let go!" Bondarev hissed, as if suffocating. And suddenly, everything went quiet. I sat on the bed and stared blankly at the ceiling. I wanted to get some kind of sign that everything was fine with the old man. Broken glass rang in the apartment above. Some furniture moved and feet stamped. Those were heavy footsteps. The tumor man walked from room to room, whimpering softly, but Bondarev was silent. Something crashed and rolled again. It looks like a pot was thrown off the stove, but there were no stern remarks in response to this. The monster ran the house, as he wanted. Then I thought I heard the door lock click. The door opened, but the creature was still walking around the apartment. I couldn't ignore it then. He grabbed the phone and called the police. He said he heard a fight upstairs. The tired attendant asked stupid questions, trying to convince me that there was no need to call a police squad for any neighborhood quarrel. It's quiet now, so no one is fighting anymore. Why do you think someone was killed? Have you seen it with your own eyes? I was persistent, and the attendant gave up. Okay, we'll be there soon and check it out. They didn't tell me the time, and it seemed like I had done my duty. He could have sat there and not twitched, but he couldn't do that. I wanted to see what was going on up there. It's 5 in the morning, and the whole house is quiet, as if no one has noticed anything. I took a knife from the kitchen drawer just in case. He went out into the entrance and rose silently, as if hovering over the steps. The door to Bondarev's apartment was ajar. Trembling with fear, I approached the threshold, peered into the dark corridor, and whispered, "Victor, are you here?" But they didn't answer me. Gripping the handle of the knife tightly, I stuck my head through the threshold and saw a pool of blood spreading from the open room. Thick and dark, like ink. There was a lot of it, a lot of it. Blood literally covered the entire floor. I took a step back and was about to leave as soon as possible, but suddenly the door to the room opened wider. There was a monster standing there, a cluster of purulent tumors, ulcers of human-shaped growths. It was breathing just as hoarsely, stretching and narrowing its mouth. And at his feet lay Bondarev, dead. His head was literally crushed into a pancake. Both eyes bulged out of their sockets, and his jaw was broken in several places. Bones were sticking out of his face. Killed him. He killed him. I stood there in shock and couldn't move. He mumbled these words like a fool, as if what was happening was not real, but some kind of memory. Although somewhere in the depths of my soul, there was a trembling understanding that I had to leave in order not to become the next victim. And suddenly he said in a hoarse, guttural voice, "I killed him. Killed him. He was bullying me. Experiments. A phenomenon. Phenomenal regeneration. Experiments. Analyses. He made me like this. He was testing his contagion on me. And he turned me into this. The monster struck its chest with a rotten hand and screamed. He cut me up every day. Burned. Tortured. He deserved to die. He deserved to die. I covered my ears to block out that terrible scream that brought me back to reality. Finally, as if I had woken up from a nightmare, I found the strength to run away and lock myself in my apartment. I didn't want to see or hear anything else. If only it would all end, let this monster be taken away from our house. It shouldn't be here. But when the police arrived, there was only the corpse of my neighbor in the apartment upstairs. It looks like the monster escaped. The police questioned me as the only witness, and I told him everything I had seen. I suggested they look for records. Bondarev was going to defend his scientific work and conducted some experiments. There must be a ton of recordings in his house. And indeed, the police turned over everything in his apartment, and they took out whole boxes of notebooks, folders, and notebooks. There must be a lot of details about how he tortured his monster. Bondarev. Oh, you're Dr. Frankenstein. I wasn't so wrong in suspecting my neighbor. He was probably even worse than he looked. He was fired from the Scientific Institute for something. He deceived me by saying that the creature living in his apartment was unreasonable. It wasn't just a cancerous tumor. It could speak and was aware of its suffering. This monster was still a human, and the old man had been torturing him every day for dozens of years. The sadist. I've often thought about the monster's words. Was he telling the truth when he said that Bondarev himself made him like this? He condemned his grandfather to endless suffering, although maybe that was also a lie. And they're not really related at all. Maybe a mad scientist promised someone recovery and immortality, or even abducted a random person from the street. These are questions that will remain unanswered forever. The apartment upstairs is still empty. I was sure that the escaped monster would be caught with such and such an appearance. Besides, he was probably blind. I never heard from him again. Either he managed to hide well, or they found him, but chose to hide it. Maybe he's being tortured in some secret laboratory now, or he settled in a sewer and is now rotting alive there. In any case, the outcome is sad. This monster killed my neighbor, crushed his head, but for some reason I did not sympathize with the deceased. I felt sorry for the creature that had spent its life in agony, and maybe it would never end. Such an existence is worse than death, forever burdened with your ugly body, mind, and pain. Thinking about the torments of man, I became somehow sad. I don't want to play on the computer. I don't want to go out. I spend all my free time at the window. I watch the wet yellow leaves fall from the trees. And I keep thinking.